Hello and welcome back to a YouTube video. Today I'm doing the 25.19 Midlane Tierlist. So if your content, subscribe and let's get into it. I want to start this video off by just saying there's been a lot of negativity and just hostility towards my videos and my channel as of recent. And I know those people probably won't watch this video, which is why I want to use this as a chance to thank the people which have stuck around and been supportive throughout the 2-3 years I've been doing YouTube. It means the world to me. I obviously do this as like a hobby. It's a very passionate hobby of mine, and seeing the positive comments and people just being generally supportive, it means the world. So yeah, thank you guys. I really do mean that. It means the world to me. But yeah, let's get into the video. So there were a couple of buffs this patch. We saw a buff towards Syndra, Mel, Brand, Ari, and LeBlanc. We didn't actually see any direct nerfs outside of Corki. Corki is quite popular in competitive as an ADC option at the moment, being pretty safe and being very reliable, especially at his level 9 breakpoint on Q. So we've taken a bit of a nerf towards that, trying to kind of open up the bot lane pool a bit more. Generally for mid, he was already underperforming. Mid lane Corki's not been in the greatest state for a while now, and he will continue to be towards the bottom of the tier list. So let's get into it. The D tier is going to consist of the same champions. We have the likes of Varus, who still maintains some level of player base in the mid lane. AP Varus, though, hasn't been good for a while now. They nerfed his aggressive AP ratio quite a while back, and then tried to push it towards his W on hit. Didn't really do enough to kind of compensate the scale of the nerf. AP Varus in the past was a great tank killer. You probably saw clips back along where AP Varus could one-shot Cho'Gaths from 10k HP. It isn't in that kind of state anymore. That was quite egregious back when it existed. Right now, it just doesn't really work as that good of a standalone pick. There might be some games you can get away with it. Generally though, I think if you play the Experimental Hexplate or the Ginsu's variant of Varus, it performs a lot better in both the solo lanes, so I would recommend trying that if you want to play Varus solo lane. But I generally don't think the champion's in the greatest of states at the moment. Even in bot lane, he's definitely suffered a decent chunk of nerfs because of his competitive presence. The other two champions here, actually the other three champions here, Tristana, Corki, and Smolder. In the case of Smolder, we've seen him pop up in competitive as this niche counter pick to Yone sometimes. Overall, in solo queue, he just doesn't have a great spot in the mid lane at the moment, but he's relatively popular. Actually, a decent chunk of people play him, but he doesn't perform that well. It's not the kind of pick I'd recommend looking at if you're looking for an AD option. It's relatively slow to come online, and it's pretty gold heavy in its current iteration. You need to get your items to really be able to kind of maximize your value at 225 stacks, and right now, yeah, I have them in the D tier. The other two, yeah, Tristana and Corki, so both these two suffered actually relatively similar nerfs to Smolder. Back along, these three all were pretty popular in solo lanes. The direct nerfs to their kind of baseline wave clear and their overall level scaling, because when you're in a solo lane, you're going to get access more XP, has hurt them, put them in a pretty they've been in a pretty bad state for a while now, so I just wouldn't really recommend these champions, but they are still AD options, and I don't think the D tier options at the moment are miles away from being viable champions. If you're comfortable on them, if you have the mastery, they can definitely work as options within your pool. Azir wraps up the D tier. He got nerfed more recently, so I've dropped him back down from the C to the D tier. Obviously, Worlds is coming up. They don't want Azir to be #1 priority. He is currently on 25.17, which is what a lot of the regions kind of play on at the moment. So hopefully, with the nerfs towards his W, I believe base damage and AP ratio, it should definitely see some level of Azir priority move away. Moving on to the C tier then, I have stripped out Viego and Kog'Maw. They got buffed more recently for mid lane, but have seen pretty aggressive fall-offs in their pick rate ever since those buffs. I think they can both work. I'm not going to include them because there just isn't a huge amount of sample size, and if you want to play these champions, I think it will just come down to personal preference and what you want to do with the champion. So having them on a tier list just ends up either being misleading or not quite. It's probably not the resource you're looking for. So both these two champions, I didn't rate them particularly highly. I don't think that they had pretty clear weaknesses. I think that was just the issues with these two champions. And yeah, for the moment, I'm gonna take them off the tier list. We lead off with Yone then. He's been in a bad state for a while now for solo queue, but they can't really buff him because of his competitive presence. He's considered the #1 AD mid laner at the moment. AD mid laners are in a pretty unique spot at the moment where, because of competitive, there are certain champions like your Yones and your Jaces, which Riot have to sometimes be kind of careful with buffing because they are, well, facilitators for AP champions in the jungle, and there is a very limited pool of them. Most like professional players deem like your Talons, your Kianas, your Zeds pretty non-viable in the mid lane outside of like very, very niche circumstances where maybe like Zeka plays Zed, but they won't really see play, which is why, yeah, Yone has definitely suffered from that, and to an extent Jace, Jace not so much. He isn't quite as bound as Yone. Jace obviously has like a level of top presence as well. The recent buffs did help him. I think if you want to learn Jace, it's not a bad time, but he is obviously very hard to pilot, so I never really recommend him for like average play. But further you go into Elite though, I do think this champion becomes a lot better, and he is usually a bit easier to pilot in the mid lane, so that is definitely something to kind of highlight with the pick. Gangplank, I remember the tier. He's pretty heavily like OTP dependent. Like you need to sink a lot of mastery and time into this champion to really get the most out of it, and if you're willing to do it, you'll be rewarded. If you're not, then he's usually just a pick not worth considering, so I just have him in the C tier at the moment. If you want to sink time into him, yeah, it's maybe not. I usually like fluctuate him like B, C, even A sometimes if I think he's really, really good to sink time into. Right now, I think he struggles a bit more with some of the keystone options. Like he's definitely suffered from like Grass being nerfed quite a while ago for ranged champions, and for like the modifier on his Q, he definitely suffered from that as well. So I have him in the C tier at the moment. Ryze and Talia wrap up the remaining C tier options. In the case of Ryze, he's just been under the bar for average solo queue for a while now. Obviously, they can't really buff him because of his competitive presence. He did actually get buffed a while ago, and then they had to quickly strip some of that away because of his competitive presence like really spiking. And if Azir is #1 competitive prior, then Ryze will be. And I think Ryze going into Worlds is definitely a pick which will very heavily be priored. So I wouldn't expect to see buffs in 25.20, but maybe 25.21 has something for him. Talia more recently had her kit kind of adjusted to be a bit more forgiving on the mana costs, but losing some power through like her base damage, so you're less encouraged to go like your double mana opener with like a Ceres plus Blackfire or Roa. I think sometimes I see people fluctuate. I think right now the builds obviously lean a bit more to just like heavy AP variants, and Talia jungle looks to be in a pretty good spot. Talia mid definitely still looks to be slightly under the bar. She was already slightly under the bar for solo queue though, so I'm just going to leave her in the current position. I don't think she's quite as recommendable as just some of the other mages, which I either think have bit clearer like strengths, or they are just a bit better in the current state of the game, and or like recently buffed things like Syndra, for example. Moving on to the B tier then, so we lead off with Kiana. She's just an AD elite skewed assassin. She kind of fits in with all the other assassins I have in the beta at the moment, where if you're willing to sink time into them, I think they can be really rewarding, but you need to put the mastery into them, and they are always going to be to an extent elite skewed. I think just AD assassins traditionally are, or even just like assassins as an overhead class, because they require a pretty high level of execution compared to some of the other champions you can opt into. Lissandra's been pretty mediocre for a while now. I actually have her towards the lower end of the B tier. She comes out conditionally as a counter pick sometimes, but even then I think she's just not in a great state. I would like to see maybe a buff going into Worlds. It could be cool to see some Lissandra, so that may be something we do in 25.20. I wouldn't hold out for it though. I think Riot, if Riot wanted to have buffed Lissandra, they probably would have already done it. This champion's been in a pretty low, like mediocre spot for a while now, so yeah, I have it towards the low end of the beta. If you want to play as a counter pick, I think that's fine. If you just generally want to play Lissandra, I wouldn't really recommend it at the moment. Twisted Fate, I really dislike. I don't think this champion is in a particularly good spot. He's reliant on his teammates a lot more than some of the other mid laners, which have a lot more self-agency in terms of like the damage they can output. Twist of Fate is back to being in this position where you want your teammates to do like something or be able to kind of utilize the fact that you have CC global pressure to kind of be valuable, and you're just not going to see that level of macro in like average play. Even into like master, it doesn't happen quite as consistently as you'd want. It's why he traditionally leans quite aggressively elite skewed or like competitively skewed, where he still even sees games at the moment. Aurora is elite skewed. She has been pretty under the bar for average play for a while. Not a pick I would say. She's a pick which I think if you're willing to put time into can be really rewarding. So I wouldn't say I don't recommend her, but there are picks which I'd recommend over her because I think they're either a bit more accessible or have a lower execution threshold where you can get like good value out of the champion. Gragas, have him in the B tier. He's pretty unpopular, got a pretty niche audience, and I think the audience which he serves pretty happy with his current state. I know a lot of people go like the Lost Chapter into Protobot build, and that seems to be pretty solid like as an option. Obviously AP Gragas traditionally leans to being a bit more just one-shot skewed, but you're just playing very heavy AP burst builds away from like the Roa Thimblewinters which you see in top lane, and I think that actually suits Gragas a bit better in the current state of the game, and I think he sits as a pretty solid beta option. Honestly, he'd be higher I think if he was more popular, but because it's more of a niche audience, he does have a level of barrier to entry, so I'm leaving him in the beta at the moment. AP Twitch, I think he's a pretty solid option. Other people have started going like the PTAs more commonly and picking him and becoming more comfortable with the champion, because obviously he's a relatively not new mid lane champion, but has gradually over time found his audience. I think that has definitely helped the champion, and yeah, I think he sits as a pretty solid B tier option. Malphite, you can go both AP or tank Malphite. Tank Malphite traditionally only comes out if you're playing against an AD laner, which you are going to see some of, like your Yasuo's, your Zeds, your those are the two main ones. The further down you go, actually, the less popular, like the AD mid pool gets. I mean, Yone's obviously going to be around that area, which is why AP Malphite traditionally is the way people lean. The Malignance variant, which I think can work in some games. I don't think it's amazing, and Malphite's kind of strength as a champion is the fact that he's a very low barrier to entry. He's very easy to pilot, but generally I don't think he's in the greatest of states, so I only have him in the B tier at the moment. The list of assassins kind of ends up being like, yeah, Kiana, Talon, Katarina. These are the champions which I think, like Zed as well, which I think if you sink a lot of time into, can easily compete with like the A and the S tier options, but are reliant on mastery, and their barrier to entry is considerably higher than a lot of the things around them, which is why I don't like support them quite as highly in the tier list. But definitely, if you want to like opt into like this plethora of champions, I'm actually going to include Fizz, because I'm dropping Fizz down. A lot of the other champions moving up into the A tier, and Akshan I also kind of included in this list, where I think they are rewarding to put time into, but you need to put time into them. Aso, I'm in the B tier. He's fine. Aso's a weird champion at the moment, where I think there are a lot of mid laners which he can definitely struggle into, like some of the more popular ones even, like your Yones, your Zeds, your Fizzes, he can have a really hard time into, but into games where you know the duration is going to go long, or into matchups where you believe you can either freely stack, or you're not going to be under a huge amount of threat to just output a huge amount of DPS, then you can be quite a solid option. So I have him in the beta at the moment, but yeah, he's in I'd say he probably leans more towards just being a counter pick option, like a good counter pick. If you pick him more generally, I think there are just too many spots where you're going to get punished quite heavily, so I don't rate him quite as highly as maybe some of the other A tier options. Orianna, I have her in the B tier. She's obviously like up there as like one of the tier 1 options in competitive, alongside Ryze and Azir at the moment. She's really good. Like the Shockwave is a really powerful ability, great for like team fighting and just being able to do a lot within the game. That combined with her honestly very like interactive laning phase, like how you want to play the lane, is really important and really skill expressive. I think it makes her a really nice champion to recommend. I do think she has a level of barrier to entry. Obviously, you're going to need to learn how to maximize your effectiveness in laning, which does take time. And if you're willing to put that time in, she's a great champion. That being said, though, I think there are other picks which just are a bit easier or lower barrier to entry, which I kind of recommend a bit over her. But she's a high B2 option. I think if you want to sink time into her, you are perfectly within your rights to. I think she can be quite a good champion in that aspect. At 6, I have him in the beta. He's a solid artillery option. I don't rate him quite as highly as like your Vel'Koz's and your Zerfs at the moment. I think both those champions are in a very good state. But Ziggs isn't bad. Like I think if you want to opt into Ziggs because you like the playstyle a bit more, then that's perfectly fine. The gap between them really isn't that sizable. If anything, it doesn't really exist. It's just like a more... It's a recommendation preference. Like I just recommend the other two champions over Ziggs. Someone else might recommend Ziggs over them, and it's perfectly fine. I think you can. I think that's just like a preference of what artillery mage. I guess consistency. I think I probably rate that slightly higher, and I think the other two are a bit more consistent than Ziggs. Silas, I have him in the beta. He kind of sits as a counter pick option at the moment. I think in the right matchups he can be really good. I think he can definitely struggle into a large pool of the mid lane, especially with like Cassiopeia becoming a bit more popular with the recent buffs. Definitely a matchup which Silas can struggle into. I like Rise and Galio. Those are common ones. I say common ones. They are like known counter pick options. There are more than just those, but there is definitely champions which you can struggle into, and I would recommend using him as a counter. Annie is a champion which I'd say is probably worth watching. I might drop her down to the C tier next patch. She's definitely looking kind of weak with the recent nerfs in 25.18. The pen, which she lost on ult, and the W base damage. It means more for like people who understand like well, I mean, previously understood like the wave clear breakpoints, and that maxing W was like a really effective way to play the champion. That bridge has like obviously been closed with the nerfs to the ability, but she's lost like genuine early game power, and that is meaningful. So I have her towards the low end of the B tier. I wouldn't really recommend her as much at the moment, but if you enjoy like the summon playstyle, having like guaranteed CC on an ability, it can be quite nice to still play the champion. So I'm going to leave it towards the low end of the B tier at the moment. Maybe above Twisted Fate, because I don't like Twisted Fate. Galio, I have him in the B tier. He lost a genuine amount of power. The percentage damage on the Q, combined with the passive damage, the AP ratio nerf on the passive, were meaningful. He's a high beta option. I don't think he's like bad by any means. He kind of just sits as like a counter pick now. Before Galio, I think you could honestly kind of get away with generalistically playing him because he just had, he had more power, and chipping away some of that power does make him a less effective option. So I do him towards the top of the B tier. He was a high A tier, low S tier pick before the nerfs, and yeah, I still think he can like get back to that if you use him like exclusively as a counter pick option. Being bumped up from the C to the B tier is Mel. Mel, I think, is overpowered at the moment, but people max are wrong. People max Q, not E. Emax like gives her another like 3% win rate to work with, which is crazy to think about, and it's like 90% of people still max Q at the moment, so that is something really worth considering. So I have her at the top of the B tier. She isn't a top of the B tier champion. She's probably an S tier champion, but it's one of those weird things which like over time I might have to like, especially going into next season, where I'd have to like rethink about how I do the tier list, because there are certain champions where I think their potential, if understood, are really, really like powerful picks, and I think Mel is definitely within that boat, but most people just won't get access to that. But if you're watching the videos, I mean, to an extent, I hope you like have listened to like what my recommendation of Emaxing on Mel, and you'll really benefit from it. You'll be playing a stronger champion than most other people, and that is a great amount of power to gain through the pick. The other picks, okay, so I'm moving a couple of picks up from the B to the A tier, which got buffed this patch. Brand's buffs were great. He is now a very recommendable mid to low elo option. He doesn't obviously scale into the higher elos quite as well as some of the other picks, so I think that is a bit of a markdown, because I like recommending picks which I think can convert quite nicely into higher brackets of play, because you can just like take them all the way through, and it's like it's more beneficial to invest time into them. And I think that can definitely like affect some champions ratings. Brand, I think to an extent is like that, but he definitely benefited from his buffs quite a bit this patch. I think in the same like boat though, I think the Vegars and the Malzahars kind of like linger around him, where I think if you're willing to just like play these champions for like climbing through mid to low elo, they're great options. The higher up you go though, they will get punished more because of their telegraphed playstyles, and the understanding of how to punish them becomes a lot more consistent. So I think that is definitely like something to note with these kinds of champions. The other two picks which I'm moving up are LeBlanc and Ari. I called out these two champions would be getting, these are win rate mover buffs, and they are win rate mover buffs. They are stronger champions. People will notice them. People will play them. LeBlanc, benefits more from her buff than I believe Ahri does. Ahri's buff was to her ultimate base damage. LeBlanc's buff was to her WAP ratio. Great for snowballing, and it means more for like proficient LeBlanc, so that is definitely something to note. In Ahri's case, it's just general power, and she will definitely feel it. Your ult being able to more consistently get you kills is very meaningful, because you want to be able to reset it, and you'll get more damage through like your resets, so that... It's not a fake amount of power to give the champion. It's not like placebo. Like, I think that is like a genuine buff to the pick. But it was like obviously meant as like a win rate mover, and yeah, people will notice her. I think she's definitely in a better state now, and I have her in the A tier. Something actually I noticed, because I actually played Ahri recently, is the champion actually feels really, really squishy. I don't know, I'm actually just like going to ask you guys, because some of you might have played a decent amount more of Ahri, but what do you think actually should be the way that Riot buffs Ahri? Do you think they should give her more durability in lane, make her feel maybe less punishing to play? Or do you like the fact they give power through the ultimate, force her to kind of play around like the ult and then like the combos through that? I'm actually curious, because I don't play a huge amount of Ahri. It was just something I observed when I was like playing the champion. Zoe, I've run the A tier. But if you're comfortable playing the pick, she can feel quite quite powerful at the moment. I think more people over time have kind of like noticed and picked up the champion. I don't think she's like a top D A tier kind of pick. I think she also requires a decent amount of time investment, and if you're willing to put that in, yeah, she's rewarding. Like a lot of the kind of AP assassins or like burst mages, I think if you understand your like kind of like lethals and how to like effectively play lane, they get a great amount. They become like really valuable picks. Aurelia, I run the A tier, like top lane, because, I mean, top lane and mid lane Aurelia, very similar in kind of the way you just want to play very explosively, and make sure you're, like, ahead of the curve going into, like, the 10, 15, 20 minute mark. So if you fall behind, you'll feel really, it's just very punishing to fall behind on Aurelia. And later on you go into the game, most champions outscale you. She is definitely one of the more early game skewed champs in the game at the moment. And people like punish that. And in lower elo brackets, that's definitely more noticeable. I say punish that, like game duration just goes longer the lower down you go. So that is a markdown on Aurelia. That being said though, she's an incredible time investment. Like, if you're willing to sink a lot of time into Aurelia, she's in incredibly good state at the moment. So, there is, like, to an extent, I don't recommend a champion. Like, I don't like recommending Aurelia. I think she will hopefully be changed at some point. I don't think this is a healthy iteration of Aurelia, and it's definitely very frustrating, especially in Elite, where I believe she is very performant in solo queue at the moment. So, yeah, I have her in the A tier at the moment. If you want to sink time into her, that's like perfectly reasonable, but you need to sink a lot of time to her. If you don't, that's fine. I personally don't recommend the champion, because I think it is like very predicated on like an explosive early game. Sion, I think he's a pretty solid A tier champion. Great Stonewall pick. It's very hard to move Sion in lane, and if you can get good value out of his ultimate, I think he's a very effective pick. He's also a great frontline. That being said, though, you are giving away some agency by picking Sion. You're not going to be able to do as much damage, or your individual agency is definitely lower. You're more reliant on your team, which is just something to note when playing this kind of champion. But if you're happy with it, I think he's a great option at the moment, so I do have him within the A tier. Neferi is a pick worth watching at the moment. She's gradually been, she's just been performing very well in the mid lane for a while now, and that is definitely something to note when like talking about this champion. I might even bump her up to the S tier next patch. But that's just how good her current like projection of like win rate and just power is. That being said, she's unpopular, so that can definitely swing it a bit from patch by patch, but from like my understanding of the champion, she seems pretty good as a mid lane option, very oppressive. Certain champions just don't really have the tools to like deal with the dogs, and like if you can consistently rotate Qs onto a target, do a lot of damage through that, and then like utilize your ultimate to like get picks on sides and team fight with, I think she's a very solid champion at the moment. Vex, Anivia, just have her in the A tier. She's fine. She's better than fine. She's a pretty good option. She's a very good time investment. She's usually pretty much like a locked A or even S tier option most of the time. And right now, I think she's definitely in one of her weaker states. Weaker being like she's not as overpowered as she has been in the past. That being said, though, I think she's still a great champion. I still very much recommend her if you want to put time into her. She's obviously going to be unpopular. People don't like the play pattern of the champion. But if you want to sink time into it, I think she's a great, just niche mid lane option to have within your pool. Vex, as a counter pick, great champion. There's a lot of matchups where you can utilize her as a counter pick, and there has been different iterations of Vex. Like, we've seen pretty haste-heavy Vex builds, which look pretty performant if you want to opt into them within like games where you can make them work. You can also just play like the AP burst one-shot Vex builds. I think both can definitely work depending on what you feel more comfortable with. And right now, yeah, I think she's a pretty solid A-tier option. Swain, I really like him as a counter pick into low damage compositions where you can get a lot of effective use out of his ultimate, combined with the like the damage this champion can output. Like, he's a lot better and as like an effective laner these days. I think if you opt into like Aerie, it just gives you so much more laning power, which is really nice. I think Conqueror can definitely feel quite slow in a lot of situations and definitely takes time to really ramp up and be valuable within the game. So Aerie is always going to be like my recommendation. It's just how it's like one of the ways I play Swain. Like, I think it's just very, very potent, and it covers up a lot of his weaknesses as a champion, so definitely something to note. Obviously, if you feel more comfortable playing the other variations, that's perfectly reasonable, but it's definitely something to like consider when picking the champion. Some of your more niche AP mid laners, like, I mean, these already are kind of niche, like Heimerdinger and Nico. Heimerdinger, it's obviously about understanding how to utilize his turrets effectively. He's very niche in the way he functions, which is why he is traditionally pretty heavily OTP'd as a champion. And if you're willing to sink the time to him, I think he's in a pretty good spot at the moment. But yeah, it's like understanding like how to siege effectively with this champion, combined with just bully people out of lane. That is where a lot of his effective power is. But he can scale in certain games and be very powerful later on. Nico, obviously, is become more of a support as time has gone on. Less and less people play her in the mid lane. I still think she's a pretty solid mid lane option, being an effective lane bully, combined with having a very powerful ultimate. Does give her like pretty clear strengths within the game. That being said, though, I think you have to get a good amount of use like out of her W, and you have to understand some of the like intricacies and mechanics of it, which I would recommend looking up if you are like planning on investing a lot of time into Nico, because that is the difference between just being like fine on the champion and like the champion looking really, really powerful as an option. So definitely something to note there. Kassadin, have him in the A tier. He got buffed more recently, and the buff makes him a very effective counter pick. I really like recommending him in like matchups where you feel like you can either freely scale or you can even like fight back in lane. I think there are definitely situations where that is like a potential of the champion, and he is, yeah, with the recent buffs, a recommendable option again, so very much like him being within the A tier. Vel'Koz and Xerath I will have next to each other. I think both of them are very good effective artillery options. The recent Vel'Koz buffs put him very nicely alongside Xerath. Xerath is usually my number one. I just like the consistency of the champion combined with the like the range and the very clear kind of gameplay pattern. I think it's really valuable for the champion, and it's like makes him a very easy to recommend option. So yeah, I have him in the A tier for that. And yeah, Vel'Koz, he's a bit harder to master. I think the kit is a bit more unique, but if you can get it down, you're understanding how to like effectively rotate the passives, then he's a very, very solid champion at the moment. And the ult buff, really nice for him. Like the consistency and being able to like finish people off with the bad ability now really gives him a lot of power. Garen, the recent buffs to him were really good. I honestly was surprised to see him actually gain so much from them, but being able to more consistently get your target down to like an execution threshold is, yeah, it's a genuine amount of power. And seeing the fact that Garen is performing once again quite well in the top lane, performing pretty decently within the mid lane, makes him a very recommendable AD mid lane option. Competes with like, yeah, the likes of I think Pantheon and Quinn are still my number 1 too. I really like Pantheon as an option, like very clear gameplay pattern. I honestly think mid lane is a very good role for him, and Quinn is kind of sleeper OP. The profane buffs recently were massive for her, being able to get access to your like your wave clear item 2 waves earlier, really huge for what she can do around the map and how she can effectively impact it. But Garen, I think definitely sits within the A tier at the moment as a great AD option. Same goes for Yasuo. I think Yasuo is also a great AD option at the moment. He traditionally wants like an AP jungler, which he can synergize quite well with, with, or a tank jungler where you have like some form of knockup. I think they can be really like clear, conditional like ways of picking the champion. It could also just be a knockup through support. I think that can also be your way of like setting up and accessing the fights. That being said, Yasuo's an incredible laner. He's been a pretty good laner for a while now, and being able to effectively like stomp a lot of matchups and deny a lot of champions from really kind of being able to do a huge amount early on to the game. It's a very, very effective way of playing. That being said though, yeah, he's got a barrier to entry. He's quite a hard to pilot champion, but I definitely think it is worth it at the moment. The pick's been in a pretty good state for a while now. Lux, Morgana, really like recommending them as options. I think Lux is, albeit still a popular mid laner, kind of underrated as a champion. I think her overall damage is massive. Like, she can do so much damage, combined with the fact that she's very unassailable. Her ult gives her a lot of wave clear, and being on such a short CD makes it that you can, like, in a lot of situations, just not really need to interact with the opponent. She does need gold though. That is always going to be the main factor of Lux mid. She is gated by gold. If you don't have gold within the game, you'll feel pretty underwhelming. You won't really be able to do a huge amount, which is why like CSing and making sure you're picking up kills where you can is very, very like clear condition of the champion. In the case of Morgana, she's very easy to pilot, and recent buffs to her have made her once again a very accessible mid laner, to the point where she's even seen competitive recently. But just putting a W on a wave and then being able to kind of use that to like throw them onto sides or trade with the opponent, I think it's like very, very nice for the champion. Obviously, she does suffer a bit more early on into the game. You are obviously gated by longer cooldowns, and your damage is gonna not be as consistent. But once you go into like the mid game, you have like your first item, maybe 2 items, your damage is really oppressive. You can poke people out from like a very long range, and your ultimate, your Q, gives you a lot of CC to work with, a lot of peeling tools, so, and like even setup. So I think there is definitely strengths to the champion. Maybe I could put her in the S tier. I think she sits very high within the A tier at the moment, but it's definitely a pick worth considering, especially lower down you go. The really small barrier to entry she has makes her very like recommendable as an option. Other picks within the A tier include the likes of Victor and Akali, who I'm actually going to drop towards the lower end of the A tier at the moment. I don't think they're quite as like top of the A tier as maybe I recommend them, but I do recommend them as options. I really like recommending these champions. I think they are great staples of the mid lane. Like Victor being or just having these very clear breakpoints within his kit, combined with very accessible wave clear, long range damage, good early game, good mid game, good late game, just being really solid across the board makes him a really nice pick to kind of just like offer people or just like recommend people, especially earlier on. And Akali, I think she's just the most accessible AP assassin you can get your hands on. I think the barrier to entry is definitely a bit lower than some of the other options, and she's a bit more just like mainstream as an option. There's a lot of content you can watch about Akali, like how to effectively like pull off in a lot of matchups, which like is going to be a benefit. More champions which are more popular, having access to being able to watch more videos on how to kind of play the champion is a strength. It is like very nice being able to just look up, I don't know, on like DPM, or just look up on YouTube like how some of the matchups go, and then just like being able to either replicate it or understand it so you can kind of like do that in other like similar matchups. Really, really important. And then the actually dropping down from the S to the A tier is Kennen. I don't think he's bad. But in fact, I think he's pretty good as a champion. But there's just a lot of really solid S tier mid laners at the moment, and he's niche. I think maybe I shouldn't move or like not recommend niche champions as much. There's definitely like some level of like maybe recommending niche champions is a strength, because obviously less people are going to play against them. They're not going to be as understood, but there's also the weakness of that where they fluctuate quite a bit. People will the builds might not be quite as refined, or there just won't be as much content of the champion, so you won't be able to learn it as effectively. There's obviously all these things you've got to wait, and yeah, so Kennen, what to say, I think Kennen is still a really, really good mid lane option if you want to put time into him, but I'm just going to drop him down to the A tier at the moment. Yeah. So the S tier champions, the AD ones are still, actually right, I'm missing Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath's within the B tier at the moment. Surely Cho'Gath just isn't in that great of a state at the moment. I think general tank Cho'Gath is fine as a mid lane option. Like, I actually think you can definitely make it work, and I think you could probably sit quite nicely alongside Sam. Like, I think some of the tank mid lane options where if you're willing to give away some of your own agency to enable either your ability to peel your team more effectively or give away some more resources, I think that can be a way of playing the game. It just depends on how heavily you weight that kind of thing. So the S tier then. The two AD options are Pantheon and Quinn. As I spoke about with Quinn, I think the profane buff was massive for her. She's already in a very strong spot at the moment and very much solidifies her as a great S tier option. In the case of Pantheon, I think mid lane is an incredible role for him. He has a lot of matchups which he can quite easily stomp, and generally he wins most lanes, being able to kind of like pod people out with his Q and then use that advantage, or like wave clear, and then like use that advantage to kind of move onto sides, use his ult to effectively roam around the map. Very nice for the champion. The jungle nerfs are definitely worth noting though. Like, being able to either not poach away camps or do less objective damage is going to hit mid lane. That you are going to have times where that will be seconds off like your tempo. So definitely something to like mention. Do I think that like heavily swings him? No, he will remain as an S tier champion, but he's definitely not like one of the premier S tier options. I probably rate Quinn maybe slightly over him at the moment, but he's definitely still around here. Hui in the previous patch got a really nice buff, very much solidifies him as a great S tier option. He's going to be a bit harder to pilot than maybe, actually, but I think some of the S tier options have maybe some level of barrier to entry, but I think the investing time into them is just so rewarding at the moment, but I just recommend them so heavily as options. Things like Echo also, like I think you need to understand like how you want to go about playing this pick, how to effectively use his ultimate and what your like execution angles are, but if you understand that, he's a great champion at the moment. I think Echo just generally, like in both jungle and mid, same goes for Diana, are in very, very good spots, so you can like even flex him if you want as an option. That being said, yeah, Hui 9 ability or 10 abilities, and being able to understand like which one you want to effectively use in a certain way is going to be a barrier of entry to the champion. That being said though, once you learn that, once you get like past that hill, he's a really, really nice champion to opt into. Great damage, great wave clear, great scaling, not even a horrible early. Like, he can effectively trade quite nicely early onto the game, has a good amount of range, and like the mana not mana regen, but mana like return on his E is really nice for him. So yeah, it's just something to note with the champ. Well, it's not E, it's WE. It's really nice for him. So it's just like something to note with the champion. Kayle, great scaling option, is like my number one premier scaling pick. Mid lane, she's just so unassailable, and she will just be inevitable in a lot of games. And the lower down you go, the more consistent you are going to get to those points. The key factors with Kayle though is she needs XP and she needs gold. Like, you can't do one or the other, you need both so you can be relevant throughout the game. But it is very easy to get access to both at the moment, which is why she's such a recommendable S tier option at the moment. Vladimir, really like him as an AP pick. Vladimir mid's been in a very good state for a while, and honestly Vladimir top's also been in a very good state for a while now. Being able to either honestly like bully out some lanes, but just generally being able to scale up, be a team fight monster as long as you're executing your damage correctly. He's a great champion and a very recommended S tier option in solo queue at the moment. Syndra, the recent buffs were great for her. She goes from the top of the A tier to the S tier. I once again really recommend her as a solo queue option. She did lose some scaling through her durability. Not a huge amount though. Like, the damage return is just so much more through the Q, and like obviously having more effective E's is just really big for her. So gonna be once again within the S tier. Cassio, the buffs were massive. I'm honestly surprised they swung anywhere near as hard as they did. Like, Cassio wasn't like far off being a solid option, but the buffs pushed her way past that, like gaining so much more damage on the empowered E, combined with 50 more mana, level 1. Really, really big for the champion. Just getting access to so much more effective damage, like especially early on into the game, is really, really big for her. But Diana, in the S tier, still remains as an S tier champion. I think one of the key factors of Diana mid is she's an incredible lane bully. Like, she does so much damage with her sweeping Q. Like, early on to the game, can poke people out quite nicely. Like, she can, yeah, like work as like a ranged mage, and then once you like put people into your kill thresholds, you can just like play into them. It's very uninteractive for a lot of champions, and yeah, so few champions have like great tools to do with that kind of play pattern. It makes her a really good mid lane option at the moment, so definitely something to note with the champion. And overall, those are my thoughts. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.